Great. Okay. Hi, everybody. I am really excited to be here with Bill Sawyer, one of our alumni from Carlson, who's going to share a little bit about his career journey in the insights and marketing space. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill. Bill, can you share a little bit about your career story with our students?
Sure. So I've been in consumer insights, category management, retail planning now for the last few years. But if I really start my story, I have to go back. I was in retail. I was a manager of a sporting goods store, and I learned that I really enjoyed working with customers. I learned that I really wanted to understand what they were looking for, and there are a bunch of different things that influence kind of their buying decision. So I took that, kind of that little bit of drive. I went back to the Carlson Business School, got my MBA, and that led me to General Mills, where they helped really refine and give me a solid foundation for qualitative and quantitative data. So they've got a great research group there that I got to be a part of, but I really learned the ins and outs of how to influence, what marketing people call the 4 Ps: product, price, placement, and promotion. So, and how to kind of manipulate those to really drive consumer behavior. So I took those experiences, and then I got a great opportunity to join Universal Studios and work with the in the DVD industry. And I've been doing that now for the last 18 years, and that's really helped me refine my analytics skills. And if you think about it, the movies business, a brand new product launches every single week. So a new disc goes out, a new story goes out. It might be right for you. You might love it. Might be a rom-com. You got to have it. Could be an action that I love. Again, it is different. But kind of with all of that, I got to learn how to adapt to a new product and a new item on the shelf. But I also got to build really strong relationships with retailers and distributors and learn how to kind of tell that story to drive sales and drive growth.
I love it. That's awesome. So speaking of that, then, some
Sure.
of the things you've learned, can you give our, our audience a sense of like, what are some of the major buckets of work when you're thinking about, kind of insights and then we'll kind of dig into maybe how that actually shows up in a work day.
Sure. So the first kind of big buckets, I probably put things into probably about 4 buckets. The first one is kind of that sales data review. I'm digging into sales data all the time and understanding what happened last week, why things were up, why things were down, and even from a high level, gross, but all the way down into the individual product level. How did one specific title perform? With that, then, is after that, I look at competitive intelligence. What did the rest of the market do? What was my competition kind of doing that? What might they be doing? What do I hear is kind of coming up? So you've got to not only on your own sales, but you got to understand what other manufacturers are doing, or in this case, other movie studios were doing. With that information, then my third bucket is around forecasting and understanding, knowing this stuff. What's the direction that the business is going to go? Because all of this past data is great to have, but you've got to be able to take that, interpret it, and apply it to a potential future state. And, again, and forecasting is always wrong. It just is.
Oh.
You will not, if you hit the mark, congratulations. And I've been lucky a couple of times to hit the mark. But in general, it's a forecast for a reason. You made some assumptions. You said this is going to happen and this is going to happen. But now you continually refine those assumptions to get your forecast to where you think it's going to be and where your sales targets are. And lastly, kind of with all that forecasting and all of that data, the last bucket's probably around sales strategy and execution. There's opportunities to promote your product. There's opportunities to get new placement for the product. How do you go about that? How much money can I spend? So yeah, sales data, competitive intelligence, forecasting, and kind of that sales strategy piece are 4 big buckets that I focus on.
Yeah, that is really helpful to kind of see how all of those also interplay with each other.
Oh,
And then,
definitely.
I know there's no such thing as a typical work day, but I know that our listeners are interested in how might your work, how does it actually show up over the course of a day? Like a not so a typical day, but a common type of day. How might these show up, these different buckets?
Big cup of coffee first thing in the morning because you don't know what's coming at you for that day. So you've got to be ready for it. There you go.
Mhm.
You got your coffee. I've definitely had one for me as well.
Mhm.
But at the beginning of the day, my routine was I would get up and whether I was at home or in the office, first I would check emails.
Okay.
And just kind of make sure that nothing kind of popped up overnight. My boss didn't get in early and kind of said something because that throws off your entire day. So it's just you make sure that nothing is going to change, at least at that point. And then I take probably a few minutes just news within the industry. It's I'm drinking my coffee, so you've got that first 10, 15 minutes. I've checked my emails. There were a couple of sources that I would go out. Did anything big happen? Did a company report earnings? Did somebody put a promotion out? Did somebody do something? So uh understand, did something change that was newsworthy? And it's
Sure.
good, nice just to kind of have that pulse high level. It's not necessarily a data point, but just kind of back of the mind to understand
It's the
what's going on.
context that
Yeah.
the work, yeah, especially when you mention competitive intelligence as part of what you're doing. So,
Yeah, and that 15 minutes of really just kind of checking the news, checking kind of the trade magazines is a piece of that to understand where things are going.
okay.
Then after that, then the nitty-gritty happens. I mean, then it's like, okay, for example, if this was a Monday, I would be going back and looking at last week's sales. You're using kind of whatever tool you've got to kind of pull down that data and you start analyzing it. And maybe it's sales data, maybe you're reviewing social media posts. In some cases, you're looking at online reviews of product. I mean, there's so many
Mhm.
bits of data that you can use and find. But you've got to go through all that, sift through all of that and go, okay, this is what I've got. Now I take the opportunity. Are there any patterns? Are there any trends? Is there anything that I had seen previously that I'm still seeing, or did the trend change, kind of with that? Did some assumptions that I make on consumer behavior stay the same? Are those assumptions still valid? Because we all make assumptions kind of around, hey, we think if we do this, the consumer's going to do Y. They're going to buy more. They're going to do something. And within that, a lot of times the answer is yes, we made the right call. Other times you go, wow, I really thought that was going to sell last week and it didn't. Well, what happened? And so you start kind of digging in a little bit to why didn't that happen? You don't have all the answers, but you start at least putting those assumptions down to why
Mhm.
did it? And
Yeah,
it
I'm
can
being
be,
like and curious, right? I'm being curious. I'm also thinking about how COVID must have been, in your industry too, and trying to think like, well, how is buyer behavior impacted too? So,
Exactly, because all of a sudden you don't have people going to stores or they're buying online, or where you shop and how you shop influences that decision. If you go into a store, for example, you're bombarded by billions and millions of brands, and they're designed to catch your eye. You walk down that aisle, that end cap is designed for you to stop and grab something. If you're searching on Amazon, you don't have that. Amazon's not a shopping experience, it's a buying experience. You go into the search engine, you type in what you want, something comes up and you buy it. It's almost that straightforward. It's an exchange. Maybe you look at a couple of the products and decide, okay, this is the one right for me, but you almost have an idea. Whereas going into a store, you have all of these other things. You may have said, yes, I'm going into this store to buy this. Well, you just bought 8 other things and now you don't have the money to buy that, which impacted my sales. And I didn't see that sale, show up this week. And again,
Mhm.
that's something that then is harder for me to capture of why you didn't pick it up. We thought you thought you would, you still didn't. So again, despite everything that you might know, something else kind of outside might influence that decision that caused them to not buy, or maybe even luckily buy your product.
Right. That's
So,
fascinating. That's super interesting.
thank you.
So going back to your day, so
Yep.
you're
So
working
yeah.
morning, gathering information, kind of catching the landscape of what's going on.
Yep.
And then, are you working more in teams or in meetings or solo? What does that look like?
And that was my next point, because at
Okay.
that point, you likely are now starting kind of being knee deep within meetings. You've had a chance, and I typically would get in early before that first meeting to do some of this stuff, but your day could be filled from top to bottom, with meetings. And that's the opportunity to kind of share information and share the stuff that I've learned. You learn new things, but I've learned more and more often, you can go from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, nonstop meetings, and you don't have an opportunity even to kind of get some of that work done kind of for your job. But that's the nature of the beast right now. But within a lot of those meetings, though, you do get collaboration. You get to share ideas. There's value for those. So as much armed as I can come in for with that data, with those analytics, with those trends, with that competitive intelligence, then I can step back and kind of share that, and we can decide, okay, this is going to impact our marketing campaign. This is going to change the product development on this one product because now we know this. And you never know which piece of information that you've got is going to make that decision. But having all of those at your fingertips really kind of helps move that meeting and make that meeting productive. You've
Right.
got so many meetings, you don't need to have a second, third, fourth meeting on the same topic. Try to do it all kind of, within that one bucket and get those decisions made.
That's great. And I also, I hope that our listeners are realizing too, decisions aren't made in a silo, right? So it's, working together. We talk a lot about, teams bringing diverse perspectives. And so by you describing your day helps me kind of get a sense of there's a lot of cross-functional and cross-conversation happening. So as we think then about hearing, about the work that you do, what a day looks like, we'd love your insights, pun intended, about what would be some key skills that you would encourage, candidates heading into the market, looking to get into insights. What would be some skills, knowledge bases that would be helpful?
So I think, yeah, there's a handful of buckets that I'd look at kind of, from a skill set standpoint. And some kind of really, hands-on is kind of this data-driven decision making. I deal with data all day long from, beginning of the morning until night. But data in and of itself is just data. You've got to be able to kind of take that data, dive into it, and use it to make a decision. There's an insight in there somewhere, but you've got to be able to use that, come up with that insight, and that insight is supported by the data that you just analyzed. So you've got to be able to kind of sift through that, thousands and thousands of, lines and numbers and go, hey, this is the big point that this comes out of this. And with that, to be able to do that, there's a level of critical thinking. You've got to be able to kind of sort through the right data versus kind of the wrong data, if you will, because again, there's so much. You've got to be able to filter this and go, yep, this is nice to know. This is something I really, really need to know. And not only do I need to know it, but my team needs to know it. And you've got to have that critical ability to dive into that and find the right pieces and components to make those decisions is key.
Mhm.
And then with all of that too, I think one thing that I kind of sort of alluded to is kind of adaptability.
Mm.
Things change. That article that I read first thing in the morning shows that so-and-so did this. That may change my entire day because now we're reacting to something that somebody did in the marketplace that's going to completely upend the direction that we were headed. So kind of adaptability, you never know where that's going to come from. You never know when your boss is going to say, hey, we've got to switch gears and do this. You never know when the data is going to lead you down one path and it's a different path than you expected to find. So you've got to be adaptable. You've got to be able to be flexible and kind of handle kind of that change piece as well. Then you got to be able to take all of this and you've got to communicate it. You can sit there and we've all sat through the boring presentations, the one where you can't read all the numbers on the slide. And what does the person say? Oh, you don't have to read this, but I just wanted to put this up there. Well, then don't put it up there, in the presentation. That's a handout. That is something that's great for somebody to have. So you've got to be able to know your audience and effectively communicate everything you've learned to that audience. And lastly, I think from an insight standpoint, to understand kind of consumer behavior and why people do things, you have to have this natural curiosity. You've got to want to understand kind of why people do things. And that leads you down so many different paths and options to different careers, but different tools to use, to different things to kind of research. But that natural curiosity is something that you need to have because that's where the big insights, the big aha moments come from. Rarely was it one where you set out on a path and went, yep, I'm going to go down this path and make this decision.
Right.
Always halfway through, because wait a minute, what is this? And that ends up being the big aha moment But if you didn't have that curiosity to start digging in the first place, you never would have gotten there.
I love that. It's that kind of what we also talk about, just our careers in general, that they aren't this straight line. It's very often kind of a squiggly wiggly. And that's what keeps things interesting too,
Yep.
right? It helps you
It's
nerd
easy
out.
to look back and go, wow, I can see how I've gotten here. But when you look in the moment, you're going, how did I get to this place?
Yeah,
Same thing kind of with this insights development. It's kind of this path, but you can look
right.
back and go, oh, I've got it. So,
Yes. And this is a little bonus question that our audience,
sure,
I just want our audience to know I did not let Bill know I was going to ask this, but Bill, you're more established in your career, and some of the folks listening to this may be more on the early end of their
sure.
careers. You speak with confidence and knowledge and wisdom. Did you feel like that at the beginning of your
Oh God,
career?
no,
Oh, okay.
not even close.
Okay.
Yeah, I was afraid to kind of speak up and kind of share things, even, with my boss. You're afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah.
You're afraid to kind of look like, oh, that's a crazy idea. Let's kind of put them in the corner. But I think throughout my career, there are those mistakes you make, there's those wins that you have, but combined, that gives you the confidence to understand your strengths. And it helped me understand mine. So then I can kind of sit in a room and confidently go, hey, this is what I think. Based on what I know, this is the direction. Am I always right? No, but I now at least have the confidence to speak up and influence those decisions.
I love that. Thank you so much, Bill.
Oh,
This
you're
all
welcome.
of this information, all these insights about your career have been super helpful. And thank you again for your time and for giving back as one of our alumni.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.